Hello and welcome to panel 2, Urban Air Traffic Control. My name is Chris Janke. I'm a professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and I'm going to be your host here today for panel 2. First of all, I would like to welcome our speaker for panel 2, and then we will enter in a round for short pitches and then discussion. So I would like to welcome to the stage Torsten Klimke of the European Commission. And you can give him a big hand. And also Daniel Rubio, Chief Technology Officer of AirMap. Welcome to the stage. And Sabrina, Managing Director, Gesellschaft für Luftverkehrsinformatik. Thanks for being here today. So, before we start, a few words from my side. I told you I'm from the university, so for me it's very hard to cut short, but I will try today. So when I teach from my students about unmanned systems, we talk about unmanned systems in all domains, and I always say, well, we also have to look at the manned platforms, and that's what we're going to do today. We talk about flying cars, about manned platforms in the aerial dimension, taking over several aspects of mobility, and especially in urban areas and also in Europe. So you saw some examples, and some of them were self-piloted. So you have a flying car, a manned drone, an electric flying taxi that brings you from A to B in an urban environment, and some of those might be self-piloted, but the next step might be remotely piloted. And after that, it's going to be automatic, and then autonomous. So these are the steps that we have in the research area, and with increasing autonomy, we will need to talk about the prevention of mid-air collisions, about coordination, trajectory planning, about the harmonization between manned and unmanned systems, and that is the topic of our panel today. So some people call it UTM, Unmanned Aircraft Systems Traffic Management. We called it Urban Air Traffic Control. And I'm very happy that we have such distinguished guests here to speak about this topic. And I would like to start with Torsten Klimke. We will look forward to your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'd like to give you a very kind of short overview about what we are actually doing in this area. So some of you might have the hopefully wrong perception that Europe normally creates more problems. In this case, we're actually trying to help, and we're trying to help a new market and a new technology to develop. So how are we going to do this? Our intention is to help creating a European market. So not only a market that is regional or local, but one that actually can help your products, your services to be provided not only in one member state or maybe a few of them, but all over Europe. What do we need for that? We need framework conditions. We need EU-wide rules, because this is not only about technology and showing that technology works. There's also, of course, the question of the customers, of the market. So what are the customers and the general public looking for? What would they like, and also what are they able to tolerate? Because drones as well are of course a topic that create concern to some citizens. And last but not least, global harmonization, because when we're talking about larger markets, of course we don't want to stop in Europe. We want to help, in particular, European companies to thrive not only on our internal common market, but on a larger scale global market. The big year for us. Oh, it's not showing up. Sorry, my fault with technology. There's a big year, so it didn't take me until 2019 at least. This is happening now, so we're working on this now. And we want to have the first framework conditions in place in 2019. So in 2 years' time, a little bit more than 2 years' time, we want to have framework conditions so that these services can start all over Europe. And how? With the U-Space. You've already heard a little bit about this U-Space. and we see it in different phases. You can see there on the bottom is actually a link to a blueprint paper, which some of you might know. If you don't know it, please have a look. It's relatively short, it's relatively easily readable, and it shows the plans that we have for this use space. So 2019, the beginning, the start, the first services. And there we're talking about e-registration, e-identification, and geofencing. So as basic services that will be available all over Europe in a harmonized way. And starting from there, of course, then going into more complex services, into traffic management, into eventually autonomy. And there are already some projects, demonstration projects ongoing through our joint undertaking on CESA. But furthermore, there will be something coming up, more calls for projects, both from the Horizon 2020 work program, which will be released in a couple of days in a pre-version and end of October in the final version, and also from CESA. So what are we actually talking about? What do we want to create there? And how are we going to do this? And we have different roles in there. So it's about common standards and rules for markets that are sustainable. So not only that can start up, but that will sustain over the long-term future. So we have a coordination role in the European Commission, bringing together the member states and also bringing together drone experts. And there's a very recent group on drone experts which met already for the first time in July. Then we have rulemaking. A lot of you, or some of you might have seen the notice of proposed amendment, which is out and which actually closes today, the consultation phase. So we're looking then into early 2018 to have a proposal for rules, which then will be dealt with further by the Commission. And of course, we have standards from the industry, and we have European coordination of these standards in EuroCAE. And furthermore, there is money available. So also for startups and SMEs, please have a look at the SME instrument. It can finance different phases from very beginning, early concept to demonstration, from 50,000 euros to 2.5 million. And furthermore, CESA Horizon 2020, please watch out for the publication of the work program. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to our discussion and questions later. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So I would propose that we have now only a short section of little questions maybe, and so I did a little research, and I know that you have been in your early career in ATC, air traffic control. So yeah, what were the changes since then maybe until today, and how would you say manned aviation can maybe learn from unmanned aviation or the other way around?
Yeah. It's actually, it's very interesting to see that, I mean, we're having, it's nearly like a new mode of transport that is coming up here. Because we have the classical aviation, which also started very much with planes flying, and then the need to coordinate, to manage air traffic and to manage flight profiles, because there were so many of them. And I think we're coming up to a similar stage here, and we also see it with automated cars, because it's a similar issue. And that's why we don't really talk anymore so much about transport modes. Of course, we want to help the particular modes with their particular issues, but for us it's mobility. So there's mobility services, and mobility means bringing people from door to door, bringing goods from door to door, and using the best suited service for that. And also here, for us, the aim is to integrate the drones more into logistic chains, to integrate them into suitable door-to-door mobility for passengers. So I think there are some similarities, and we can also learn from the past, and maybe from the mistakes we made in the past, and look also more into the application side. So the technology is coming very rapidly, but also is the society ready? Are the cities ready to take up this technology? Because we've seen it also with some other technologies, whether it's electromobility. It exists for more than 100 years, electromobility. Now we're coming to the breakthrough. And why? Because we have requirements. We have new requirements for cleaner cities. So we need to make sure that we keep an eye on the application, on what is acceptable to the public. I showed it there earlier, security, safety, noise. All of these are valid concerns, and especially when we go into large markets, we need to ensure that we have properly tested and demonstrated how the acceptance can be ensured, because we want to support this new technology and these new services.
Okay, thank you. Personal question, would you take a ride in an electric flying car?
I think I would, yeah. Especially when you see, I mean, wouldn't it be so convenient when we have an event like this, we all have very exciting and long days here, and we're tired, and we just want to go home in a city that we don't really know. So wouldn't it be so convenient to just be out there, get into your in your flying car that brings you without traffic jam to your flight? You don't have to worry about missing it. So personally, I think it sounds quite tempting, yeah.
So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Torsten Klimke from the European Commission. Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Daniel Rubio from AirMap. AirMap is the world's leading airspace services intelligence platform. So he comes today from the office of Berlin, but they also has an office in Santa Monica. I look forward to hearing from you, Daniel.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to give you a perspective of how does the airspace look in the low altitude, and it is extremely complex. We have the interface to control airspace. We have an aircraft, an airport there. We have fires. We have drones taken off from hangars. We need to avoid playgrounds for kids. We need to avoid the houses, and we need to, be aware of the crowd. All of this has to be done, while multiple aircraft are in the air, and you still need to interface with general aviation. What's interesting is that at this point in time, in the uncontrolled airspace, we can leverage a lot of technologies that have been developed and invested in heavily up to this date. And we're here at talking about new mobility. This is, primarily automotive-centric, but we have mobile technologies that have, developed connectivity and tracking for multiple devices, millions of devices at any given time of the day. And we also have autonomous driving, coming up. So we can leverage a lot of those technologies to guarantee that we have safety, performance, and compliance, because those are the essential traits to make this happen, right? And so again, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's very complex. It leads itself to a very computational output, because we're leading towards a connected world. So that's the complexity is there, but at the same time, we can actually compute that complexity and produce results for it. That's the interesting bit. So how do we actually go about flying in the low altitude airspace, particularly in complex environments such as urban environments? That's when we need to look into the discover. Where can I fly? What are the requirements for the flight? And we need to start thinking about performance standards, right? Different aircraft can have different safety ratings. That's going to reduce the cost of certification, but it also means that they can fly over certain areas or other areas that they're not allowed to. We then plan how do we gain access to that, and authorization to that airspace, and how risky is my flight. We can calculate risk based on the structural integrity of the buildings. Is there a glass rooftop? Is it concrete? Is it a school in session? It's not the same thing to fly over a school at night than to fly over a school during daytime, for example. And then I actually go ahead and just fly. The airspace is extremely dynamic. So in a 45-minute or half an hour flight to do an inspection of a tower, the airspace is changing. There's new aircraft. There's other flights that are approved. The weather is changing. So all of that has to be baked into the plan, and you need to analyze and react to that as you are on the way. When you're finished, you have to learn. The system has moved one step further, because you have had more flights with dynamic conditions. You need to understand how that can be used to improve the safety of the overall system. What are the key elements that we have in the initial stages to be able to facilitate that complex operation? So we have telemetry alerts. Can we actually gather where are the aircraft at any given time, right? We need to have the visibility. And then we also have to have the visibility of the other aircraft, so all the manned aviation that is happening around, and be able to trigger alerts when there is a potential incident. We have to gain authorization to the airspace, and we have to have a good routing and a risk management in place to ensure the safety of the operation. And finally, we have to have all of the rules and advisories properly spelled out, available, so that we can make use of that in the continuous operation. So that's what we need to do to enable the these complex operations in the airspace. And a bit of a timeline from our perspective. Today we have heavy domination of the recreational drone. That's what you see flying. That is what's causing a lot of the media buzz, and we start to see some very positive outcomes as a result of the usage of these aircraft in disaster situations, as well as we benefit from the great filming that is being done with them. I believe that there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the enterprise exploitation of airspace, inspection of fixed infrastructure. Finally, we'll have package delivery as well, and then we'll have eventually drone as a service. I have no doubt that 10 years from now, we're going to have a lot more aircraft up there, and then drones will actually go from a vertical ownership model to a horizontal model, where thousands of drones will actually be stored in a hangar, and they will be running routine daily operations in an autonomous fashion, very, very safe, okay? But delivering a lot of value to society, because there's a lot of economic value locked up in the airspace, particularly in urban environments. And just to give you an example of how things are moving forward, in the US, the FAA has launched a method to guarantee pre-authorization of many of the flights that today is a paper process, right? And yesterday we conducted a demo in Geneva, fitting into the U-Space structure as well, that demonstrates how all of this is coming together to make it real. So it is happening. It's complex, but it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel Rubio. So thank you. And Daniel, I did a little research. So yesterday, there was an event at Geneva talking about UTM and airspace coordination. Can you tell us something about this?
I just preempted your question, but yes, I think that we need to, particularly in the space of the Commission and U-Space, it is important that we start taking those cues and we move from thinking about it and talking about it to actually doing something about it. And particularly in Switzerland, with the collaboration of FOCA, SkyGuide, ourselves, and then Intel and a number of OEMs, we demonstrated how can you have, and CETA, by the way, for the registration part, we demonstrated how you can start embracing the concepts of U1, which involves the e-registration, e-identification, and dynamic geofencing. And we put all of that to prove, and we had 3 aircraft in the air. We pushed the dynamic geofence, and they all had to return to land. All of this while blending it with manned aviation and with electronic authorization of the flights. So yes.
So speaking about the software, you already do a very good job in coordinating airspace for drones. So how can you think some of those elements could be overtaking for the future of urban manned mobility with flying cars, electric taxis? What elements can we expect?
As I said at the beginning, I think that there's a lot of technology that has been developed for the mobile space, that is actually being leveraged right now by the autonomous cars. That eventually, you left that 100 feet, 200 feet up in the air. It's the same. It's exactly the same. So all of those technologies converge really well to make this a reality. So if you took vertical mobility today on its own without leveraging anything that's been done before, it would be an extremely tall order. But you saw it in the previous presentation, Intel is actually, participating with volocopters. So we see that the blending of, that huge investment has gone into silicon to be able to leverage that and to make it available for this. The density is actually lower than exists, for actually, there's one handset or more than one handset per individual. I don't think we're going to be, that close in the near future. So yeah, we got room to grow.
Okay, last question, personal question. Would you take a ride in a flying car, electric taxi?
I'm doing that already.
Yeah. Okay.
Every now and then.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Rubio from AirMap. And our third speaker today is Sabrina John, Managing Director, Gesellschaft für Luftverkehrsinformatik, who manages the airspace and with smart management, unmanned and robotic aircraft, and has the concept of urban ATM. I'm very curious what that is, and I look forward to your presentation. Floor is yours.
Thank you. When flying beyond line of sight or autonomously, and in order to conduct flights safely, drones have to fulfill a lot of requirements. They have to listen to other aircraft, like drones or systems. They have to navigate on their own. They have to detect obstacles and avoid them. The problem is that this requires a lot of energy. So we can now wait until someone develops new batteries or invents new kind of power units. Or we could shift some of these tasks the drone has to fulfill. So instead of making the drone excessively smart, why not making the infrastructure smart? This is nothing new concerning infrastructure and traffic. We already know that from road traffic. In road traffic, we have traffic signs and traffic lights. In general aviation, we have radar and air traffic control. So, what do we need? First of all, we need means to locate the unmanned aircraft. These can be done with GPS or 5G, or small-size radar or passive radar. Secondly, we need to know what kind of traffic we're dealing with. So we have to classify the object. Is it a flying car? Is it a small drone? Or is it a bird? Then we have to predict where the drone is going or where the object is going. And putting all these information together, what can we do with it? From the pre-flight perspective, we can manage flight plans and do airspace management, like having a look if the flight plan does collide with any airspace restrictions. During the flight, we can look if the drone behaves. So this is the performance monitoring part. In real time, we can do conflict detection and resolution. And we can do traffic flow management, which is quite crucial, because it's a really, really bad idea being in a traffic jam in the air. Yeah, it would be bloody dangerous, to be honest. Well, infrastructure can help. It can help to conduct flights safely and efficiently. Putting all these things together, we don't look for one single solution, which is the solution at all. We are looking for components, the right components, to put them together. So, what are the benefits of infrastructure? Infrastructure can help. In that way, some problems can be better solved by infrastructure. Because on the ground, we don't have troubles with energy. We nearly have infinite processing capabilities, and costs can be shared between all users. Moreover, infrastructure can be made to consider both cooperative and non-cooperative traffic. And many components required for these tasks are already available today. So it's just a matter of the problem of choice, not of availability. And finally, no traffic without infrastructure. If you don't have infrastructure, there are flights occurring occasionally, but it's not traffic. When talking about traffic, it's about many, many objects. So we, as a company, develop conflict detection and resolution algorithms for aviation. And when we think about the future and traffic, we have this picture in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, Jon. I did a little research, and I looked into the software backbone and entities that you were talking about. So that means that basically, if you talk about autonomy, those flying objects, manned and unmanned, they will take the decision in flying up and down and take the evasive action and not crashing in the air. What do you say to people who are maybe afraid of the autopilot and being flown by a computer left and right? Is it maybe less likely that there will be an accident if there is an autopilot?
I think probably it's less dangerous being in an autonomous vehicle than driving around with people, being part of the system, because every 7 normal things we're doing today are potentially dangerous. We're tending to fail in that situation.
Yeah. So human factors are involved. Also, you talked about infrastructure and readiness. We need infrastructure to support a UTM, to enable flying objects, manned and unmanned. Do you think infrastructure is ready today in Germany, in Europe? Or is there maybe another region in the world who's more advanced in doing that?
No, I don't think that in any kind the infrastructure is ready for that. People are talking about UTM as a concept, but there are no places where we actually have a UTM in place, the whole thing with infrastructure. Certainly there are apps on the market which do a part, but there's more. There might be more.
Okay. Well, I look forward to elaborate on that in the discussion, but first of all, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Sabrina John. So, there have been seen some hands, but we wanted to make the question round only when we are sitting together in a panel discussion. Are there any questions to our podium right now? Currently, then I will start by talking about the integration, and we are currently at an automobile convention. So talking about complexity, integration in the real-world environment, and especially in urban environment. What do you think? And that is a question to the whole podium here. What is more complex in terms of technology and regulation to integrate? So flying electric taxis or autonomous cars on the street? What do you think?
I think flying cars are more complex because there are 3 things. One, we are talking about 3 dimensions. Flying cars are flying. Second thing are the limited energy constraint, or the limited energy that the vehicles have. And when there is an error, a car on the ground can stop. Well, in the air, when there is an error, and people are sitting in a flying car and they crash on the ground, probably not so good. So I think this is the more complex thing because you have so many safety issues to consider.
Okay. So, Danny, what do you think? Complexity.
I think it's a lot easier to integrate, vertical mobility vehicles than ground, and I think we have evidence from that. We've spoken to some big cities in the world, and they're scared of 2D navigation and autonomous cars. But when you talk about air mobility, the lights open up, right? So I think that it's going to be a lot easier. Also from the not just the technology. I think we can debate for hours about the technology complexity or not. I think the technology is there, right? But it's actually how do you actually integrate this in terms of vertiport, in terms of permits from the cities and all that. I do believe the cities actually will take a very strong perspective about this, and maybe even more forward-thinking than central governments about how to do this, because it resolves problems that they have today, right? In some cases, the subway infrastructure does not deliver, right, to the growth of the cities, and certainly the the stall infrastructure for terrestrial vehicles does not deliver either, right? To manage the influx of a population that increases by 1 million every 10 years for some of the big cities. So you have to look at that, and I think it's going to be made easier from the sheer fact that you actually have to make it easier, right? Because otherwise the cities will actually collapse.
That's right, yeah. Mega cities coping with a lot of traffic on the ground. So, Torsten, Klimke, autonomous cars on the ground, flying cars in the air, what we are going to see earlier. Maybe your opinion for Europe and for the world.
Well, I think we see already both of them. Especially in Germany, you see automated cars. Or maybe you don't see them, but they are there. They're being tested, and not only there. The difference probably, or the major difference is, we have cars today on the road. They are there, millions of them. And they're increasingly getting new functionalities, some of which can already be used, some of it which is probably more difficult to use, especially when you go to the urban environment. Urban environment is always more complex and more difficult. So I think most people predict that we will see road automation first on motorways, on relatively easy situations, and then later in the cities. So with flying cars, we come immediately from nothing to full flying, I guess. Then the automation level, so in the beginning, there needs to be then very much of a control. So, but entering mass market, there needs to be automation. It can't be done anymore, control flying car by flying car. It has to be done differently. So it is more complex, but that's the technology side. We are quite confident that in Europe we have good companies, we have good ideas, we have good service providers who will manage this. Another issue is the public acceptance, because it's something else having a car that you know, just acting maybe a little bit different, but it's the same kind of brand of car, you're kind of used to it. But you see suddenly something flying that you didn't see before, and that just creates a different kind of attention with parts of the population. This is something we need to take into account from the beginning. Because if we don't do this, if we don't find a good kind of level framework in between bringing the technology out, bringing the services out as soon as possible, and creating at the same time the acceptance, we will not be able to enter this sustainable stage. And sustainability for us is not only environment. Sustainable is also services and technologies that actually can last and that provide an added value and provide, of course, also income. Because it's normal, we have it in all technologies. You have kind of the startup financing phase, and then you need to enter profitability, and you need to enter long-term profitability.
So we talked about profitability, about social acceptance, about technical feasibility, and let's maybe go into the area of regulation and how it is going to be allowed or integrated into into daily life. So Daniel, you bring some perspective from the United States. What do you think is different maybe between Germany, Europe, United States, or do you see the integration of, let's call them flying objects, manned and unmanned, in other countries in the world more likely, like in threshold and developing countries?
I think you see, I don't think you can speak of a difference between the US and Europe and so on. I think that, it takes different perspectives in different parts of the world. We've seen, the approach of Dubai, right? So it's how Dubai wants to portray itself to the world, right? But I think that in general, you need to look at the need for resolving, transportation issues in cities. So I think that you will not see a country-by-country distinction. I think that the cities will start to take, a little bit more control about what happens, right, and a lot more interest. Of course, the ones that have, more, higher density, like the mega cities, will actually take, a very strong perspective on that. So I don't think you can talk about, country by country, U.S. versus Europe in terms of, and take any cues from that in terms of what's going to happen. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, feel free really to chime in. We have microphone assistants here. We can always have the opportunity to ask a question. I see one here, and the microphone is on its way.
Good afternoon, my name is Maximum Wernicke. I'm working for Frost & Sullivan in Frankfurt. And my question is, how does the podium see the future of air traffic control in urban areas when there's a multitude of drones and a multitude of unpiloted aircraft systems, especially in difficult narrow streets, under bridges, and so on and so forth?
Not very satisfying answer at this stage, but we don't know. That's why we need to have demonstrations, that why already demonstrations are starting, and we will have more. You will see more calls for topics coming up in the future, both through the CESA joint undertaking and through the general Horizon 2020 work program. Because we need to experiment. So we need to test it, and we need to see and learn from that. I don't think it's possible to, from the outset, describe exactly what it's going to look like in the end. So we have to take a kind of a step-by-step approach, as fast as possible, but also as slow as necessary. So we're working towards it, but we don't have the solution yet. I don't yet think so.
So Sabrina, what would be your stance on that? You know, the technology opportunities, the feasibility, and given the question about the challenges.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think it's not a problem dealing with urban environments. It's what I said before, you need to pick the right components. And we were thinking about the aspect of urban mobility and urban air traffic management. And what we found out, the coverage of connectivity, IoT networks and GPS might be a problem in the city. But what can help are small-size radars, which are the size of this, which come from the automotive world. And little adjustments to that, or modifications, and we could use them in the cities. They're not any dangerous at all for people, so they could be used and to get the idea where are all the participants in this play, and well, in the end, the rest, yeah.
So, you know, that's coming from the point is that, like I said, there are a lot of technologies you can leverage today, right? So if you think about when you pick up your phone and you try to get a sense of where you are, you know, it's not using just GPS. It's using, you know, Wi-Fi, it's using Bluetooth, it's using triangulation coming from the network, you know, and it's, all of those are converging to give you a very accurate position, right? So don't rely just on one technology, use the blend of all of them. There has to be a cooperative environment, right? So everybody has to talk to each other. Everybody has to be aware of, you know, where everybody is and so on. That technology exists, right? It's about putting it to use. I think you also need to leverage a lot of other technologies that are happening. You know, again, leverage. You know, the investment has happened in, you know, in mobile. Let's leverage the investment that's happening today in you know, automotion. You'll see that computer vision is going to develop a lot in the next, you know, in the next, you know, 2-3 years. It's already gone a long way, but it needs to come down in terms of, you know, power consumption and so on, right? And what you see as well is you need to overlay this with the rollout of new technologies, right? LTE today and all their mobile networks are not really suited for this because they are geared primarily towards data and voice communication. Think of 5G. 5G is geared towards IoT, where you actually have much more of a, you know, variety of different bandwidths, you know, a different quality of service. So when you overlay the projection of all of these technologies, you have a very different picture that you have today, okay? The one thing I would say is, in an ideal world, it's not a problem. But the problem is that, you know, the airspace is going to be premium, you know, medium, right? Pretty much like the spectrum. So there's going to be bidding to see who has preferential access to that airspace. And that's where the real stuff, you know, could be very interesting, because if a big company that wants to do packet delivery wants to hog the airspace and prevent others, and there are ways to actually achieve that, then you could have, you know, unfair competition. And that is an element that has to be tackled, not through technology, but through regulation.
If I may add to a very valid point, and that's also our interest in there. We don't take a stance on who is going to provide these services. But it has to be ensured that there's free access where there needs to be free access, so that there are no locked-in markets developing. So that's a big interest for us. So a general principle which we will apply and keep on applying while this process is ongoing.
So, any other question right now? We talked about the use of cellular technology and cell phones on flying objects to be plain. And of course, there are other technologies possible. So we have for manned aviation transponders that are more heavy and take a lot of power. We have cell phone technology. We have maybe other technologies from IoT. So what's going to be the technology in the future? And is it going to be only one technology, Ms. John, about tracking, drones, getting telemetry? What do you think?
No, it will be a mixture, depending on where you are and what you want to do. No, I don't think that especially when talking about the cellular network and mobile phones and all this stuff, I'm not pretty sure if 5G is really ready for that, because you need a lot of bandwidth. Especially when you are doing real-time conflict detection, you have to continuously be able to talk to the drone itself. And if you are not, yeah, there might be a problem. So there should be several things, especially when something is down.
So cell phone coverage is an issue also in Germany, right?
Yeah.
I think you have to be careful that one, because it's looking at the projection of the deployment of these technologies. 5G has been conceived with bandwidth in mind, right? So 10x bandwidth. But at the same time, the telcos and the network equipment providers start thinking about deconfliction in a much broader perspective. So it's not about centralized deconfliction in a hub that is far away from what the action is taking place. Is can you do deconfliction within the same cell, for example? That's one. But I think all of this is going to be a mixture of technologies, and at the end of the day, you have to have this deconfliction with a mixture of computer vision, a mixture of radar, a mixture of cellular technology, and a mixture of PO communication between vehicles through some standard. It could be LoRa, it could be there's Sigfox as well. There is ADSB repurposed for this. There's a ton of stuff, but it's one combination of these different things. But again, don't forget the projection of how these technologies evolve, okay, in the time frame in which regulation is going to allow the unlocking of the airspace. Because I think that's an important topic.
Torsten, there will come a time when we need to lock in a certain technology. We have a similar discussion in autonomous cars, this discussion about 5G and, of course, 5G testing. But there has to be, we need to have a minimum, there has to be a certain service quality in there. And sometimes it mightn't be the latest technology that actually can provide it also along the whole range, so from door to door. So there will come a time when we need to decide about a certain standard and kind of lock it in for a bit. This doesn't mean that we stop technology from progressing, but we will need to, in order to enable the services, we will need to have the infrastructure in place. And the infrastructure in place means it has to be harmonized, because if it's not harmonized, then again you have small island solutions. You will not be able to sell your products, to sell your services on wider markets. So this stage will need to come, and then of course there will be an evolution, there will be future steps, but we have to be careful that we don't always look into the next technology that might already be out there and might be able to do something unless we are sure that we can have a wide enough coverage for the infrastructure.
So I will not gonna let you off the stage without talking about cybersecurity, especially for flying cars, electric taxis. So we talk about connectivity, and we talk about the possibility in breaching in systems. So how important is that going to be? Encryption, maybe something else. So what is the factor of cybersecurity in the future in this field?
It's very important. I don't know what to say anymore. The problem is when you're driving in a car and your choice is not to fasten your seatbelt, you have to live with the consequences in case of an accident. And it's the same with cybersecurity. You have to secure the data. This is crucial. So, yeah, it's very important, and you should do that.
So we need encryption, Daniel?
There is, so I think, that there's a lot of different solutions that exist today. I think that there's, certificates. We tested, with blockchain yesterday in the demo in Geneva. Cybersecurity is at the forefront of everything that needs to be done in this space. But pretty much like everything that is, critical infrastructure, right? You cannot afford to not have some form of protection against that, and it has to be, thought from the beginning and impacting any actual architecture that you use to implement the service. From the beginning, it shouldn't be it cannot be an afterthought. That's the point.
So from a regulatory point of view, Torsten Klimke, can we expect standards maybe from cybersecurity in manned aviation, in electric urban manned aviation?
We probably have to think a bit further. I mean, our vision is and that's the vision we share with member states, is to have an integrated transport system. Integrated means you don't have to worry anymore or think anymore in the long-term future about which mode you're actually using. And as we're going more digital in all transport modes, so we have to cover the whole chain, from door to door. It's always quite painful and quite expensive to do this afterwards. We have a lot of existing modes, and they're discovering it now, and they need to introduce afterwards rules. So here's the unique chance actually to have it already as a design feature from the beginning. So to be secure and maybe to set the standards also that can be applied by other modes. And we have, by the way, not only for transport, but we are also doing research. There's a public-private partnership on cybersecurity, so on cybersecurity as such, because there are other sectors that need to be very secure. I mean, if your financial transactions, you want them to be secure, especially if you're talking about larger amounts. So there is quite some synergies we can also find between transport, between energy networks that are going more and more digital, or at least the control, banking sector. So we need to have actually a wide-ranging cybersecurity strategy, and we're working on that. So first papers are out, and we continue investing also in research and innovation in these areas.
So there's a lot to consider when it comes to urban air traffic management. We talked about hardware, we talked about software, about social acceptance, about the opportunities in making systems more secure. And yeah, with that, I forgot one thing to ask Sabrina John, if she would take a ride in an electric flying
Yes,
car.
absolutely.
You would? Okay. So I don't want to miss that as well. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, our time is over for this panel, and I would like to thank the panel for giving us insights from the areas. And a big hand is now good, and thank you very much for the participation in this panel. Before I hand over to the next host, I would like to thank you, and yeah, thank you very much for your for being here. Thank you very much.